Okay, Alexander, let's continue to follow what's going on in the Netherlands and with the election, which is right around the corner as well. I believe the election in the Netherlands is going to be happening on March 17th. Yes, March 17th. And there was debate on the 28th of February, and it featured Mark Rutte, the current leader of the Netherlands, and Geert Wilders, who's I'm sure is a name everyone knows. He is a very colorful and controversial politician known around the world for many of the controversial things that he says. Many people would consider what he says controversial. Some people call him far right. Some people liken him to Farage. Some people call him a nationalist. Others a patriot. Depends, where you are in the political spectrum, how you see him. But it was a fiery debate as well. A lot of interesting questions were posed to these politicians. Alexander, Mark Rutte has been in power for 10 years. I didn't know that. He has been in power forever. And even though the Netherlands is going through a big scandal, which has actually forced these elections, a scandal by the Rutte government, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, that it's Rutte, a scandal going through that's due because of the way the Rutte government was handling things. He is still the favorite, and he's still the favorite to win by a lot. And looks like those 10 years are going to extend longer. What is going on in the Netherlands, Alexander? This is a big election.
It is a big election. I mean, can I just say the reason why Rutte, I think it's Rutte actually, is so strong and stable, or at least appears to be. We'll come to that in a moment because it's actually a more fragile situation than it looks. Is that he is the Dutch version of Angela Merkel. He governs the Netherlands from the centre. He's pushed the centre-right further to the left. That has completely taken away from the left, or the left-wing parties, which had themselves been drifting towards the centre, any real purpose for existing. And they've eroded. So the Netherlands, which historically had very, very strong left-wing parties, like the Dutch Labour Party, for example, which was the dominant party in the Netherlands for many years, going all the way back to the 50s. I mean, that's basically eroded now, out of existence. And like Merkel, Rutte has created this political desert, if you like, and he remains very much the dominant force within it. This despite the fact that there are accumulating problems in his record and in his record as government, and in the record of his government. And also, very much like Merkel, he is not someone who is very skilled, who is very interested in some ways in dealing with those problems, because, as is often the case with these sort of politicians, the sort of Merkel-type politicians, long periods of power breed complacency. And in Rutte's case, again, like Merkel's, it's a complacency which goes along with unswerving loyalty to the EU and to everything that it stands for. Now, he's gone into this election looking as if he's in pole position to come out very strongly. But what is really interesting, what is really extraordinary, is that in the absence of any conceivable alternative from the left, it appears to be the Geert Wilders and his party from the right that is now providing the main challenge and the main energy in the campaign. And of course, we've seen that in the Netherlands, there have been problems. I mean, there's been lots of criticism of Rutte's handling of the pandemic crisis. There have been protests in Dutch cities. There have been very widespread protests in Dutch cities. The Netherlands has suffered from all these problems to the same extent as everyone else has done, every other country in Europe has done. And it's interesting that it is Geert Wilders and his party, which is now apparently successfully capitalizing on this, despite long-standing and concerted attempts by the Dutch political establishment to push Wilders down and to discredit him and his party by painting them as xenophobic and far right. So it's interesting to see how that is happening. If Wilders does put on a strong challenge and does manage to weaken Rutte's position significantly, that will be an earthquake in the Netherlands. It will be an earthquake in the Netherlands, and given that the Netherlands is one of the key parties in the European Union, it's right at the centre of the European Union in a way. It's one of those, it's almost, along with Germany, part of the keystone of the arch of the European Union. If there is a strong surge of support for someone like Wilders in the Netherlands, that will create a political shock which will resonate across Europe.
Yeah, I agree. If Wilders does manage to pick up a lot of support, that is going to be massive. I think it'll scare the crap out of the European Union. Geert Wilders formed the Party for Freedom, the PVV, in 2006, and this is after he severed ties with the center-right Liberal Party, which is known as VVD. He's also, so now his party is the largest Dutch opposition party. I say this because 2 years ago, we had another right-wing, right-wing populist party known as the Forum for Democracy, and they had a very charismatic leader as well, Thierry Baudet. I hope I'm pronouncing that right as well. Apologies if I'm not. But he was also a very popular politician, and they completely sidelined him over reports that he made anti-Semitic remarks, and the usual line of attack that we see when right populist parties start to take hold. Is Wilders going to meet the same fate as the Forum for Democracy as we get closer to the elections, or has he solidified himself and his party as as right now the main opposition to Rutte?
I have to say, first of all, that the Netherlands is not easy ground for a party like Wilders or a politician like Wilders. If you've been there at all, many British people do. It's a very liberal place. The Netherlands is very liberal. It's, deep down very European. That can play in odd sort of ways, because, of course, if you have waves of immigrants coming in with, Islamic ideas and Islamist traditions, that can be something that many Dutch people find difficult to accept. And, you have a sort of tension within Dutch liberalism. Do you accept these people, or do you, with the consequent restrictions on your lifestyles that you might have become used to as Dutch people, the freedoms that you're entitled, you've come to accept as Dutch people, or do you, on the contrary, say these people are not really able to assimilate into our Dutch society, and therefore we shouldn't have them, or at least not have them in anything like the numbers that we've had before, and if they do come, they must adapt themselves to the way we do things as opposed to the way they want to do things. So you have this tension, but it's not, as I said, the Netherlands has not always been a good place, is not naturally a good place for anti-EU parties like the one that Wilders leads, and politicians like Wilders. Having said that, my general sense is that the malaise, not just in the Netherlands, but across Europe, but also in the Netherlands, is now becoming so strong that people are starting to harden behind politicians like Wilders. And I get the sense also that he is a rather more sophisticated, or at least a rather more agile and effective political operator than sort of his predecessors who've challenged the establishment from the right. I think he knows better how to avoid saying things which would get him into the kind of political trouble that other political leaders have done. And I think that on this occasion, though obviously he will come under exactly the same sort of attack that all other right-wing politicians do in the Netherlands, I think he's probably more likely to survive it. I mean, he's been around also for a while now, so he's becoming quite experienced in handling the pressures of Dutch politics. And of course, he knows the Netherlands and its culture extremely well because he was brought up in it. He's part of it. He is Dutch himself. So he understands perhaps how to deal with these problems more effectively than other right-wing challengers have done.
Okay, so I think it's safe to say at this moment in time, even given all the scandal that the Rutte government has undergone, their position to win. What does more Mark Rutte mean for the Netherlands? More EU integration? What does this mean now for the Netherlands going forward?
Right.
A closer alignment with Germany? What's going to happen now?
Right. I'm going to say a few things about this. First of all, if Rutte does not win, that would be, that's barely conceivable given how strong his position is. And if he didn't win, we're not talking about an earthquake. We're talking about a shock which would provoke a nervous breakdown across Europe. I can't believe that will happen. So I predict that he will win. The question is not whether he will win, but by how big a margin he wins. If his margin is reduced, yes, he will remain what he has always been, a pillar of the European establishment, a neoliberal, all of those things. But he is perhaps less of an ideologue than someone like Macron. He would not have survived at the top of Dutch politics for as long as he has if he didn't know how to adapt himself to the changing moods. And I think rather like Merkel in Germany, if we saw Wilders doing very strongly in this election, and if it appeared to somebody like Rutte that Wilders is actually gaining traction for many of his ideas, with many Dutch people, I think Rutte would actually swing towards trying to acknowledge and adapt to that, if only in order to assimilate and neutralize it. So I think in the short term, if Wilders does well, we will actually see a fractionally less globalized, less neoliberal, less EU integrationist Netherlands than we have seen up to now. It would only be fractional because, of course, Rutte would continue to support all of those various policies that we've talked about. But remember, the Netherlands is one of those countries that has strongly opposed Eurobonds. Even Rutte's government has been opposed to Eurobonds. They do not want to see that happen. The Dutch are dead against anything like this. And if Wilders does strongly, I think Rutte's opposition will grow to any idea of Eurobonds going down the run, that come up in the future. I think his opposition will grow even more in response to that. Even if that's not what he's even if Rutte isn't particularly interested in those things, because he realizes that he has a strong and effective challenge from the sovereigntist nationalist right. So it depends a lot how big Rutte's margin of victory is. If Rutte wins by a landslide, if he increases his vote, which I don't believe, by the way, but let's assume he does, then it's more likely, on the contrary, that he will feel the greater loyalty to the EU and he'll soften off the Dutch opposition to Eurobonds. and say to the Dutch people, well, you elected me, I've got a huge majority, I'm not particularly worried about, going along with this Eurobond idea because I don't really feel any political consequences will come from it. So if the new German Chancellor, Armin Laschet, wants it, and if the new French, and if Macron still wants it, then, I'll go along with it and it will happen. But as I said, if Wilders does strongly, then we might start to see Dutch opposition to the Eurobond idea harden, and it may be that the Dutch would then harden in relation to other things, like immigration, for example.
Is that possible that, say Wilders does do much better than anticipated, and it forces Rutte and his party to move more towards the center and even more towards center right, like to just embrace a little bit of the center right or the right position, especially in terms of the EU. We see in Germany that Germany is softening to the Eurobonds issue. Could you foresee something where the Netherlands actually goes head to head or contradicts Germany's position? As Germany softens, the Netherlands hardens. As France softens, the Netherlands hardens, because France is also a question mark. With France, if you have a Le Pen as president instead of a Macron, then what position does the Netherlands play? Because I'm seeing the three big powerful countries in Europe, right? Netherlands, Germany, France. And right now they're all kind of aligned. But there is that possibility with the elections that are coming up, both in the Netherlands and in France, that things shake up, and as well as Germany, a change in power. You may see some risk between these three traditionally aligned countries.
Absolutely. Now let's just unpack that, because you see that's an interesting contrast between Germany and the Netherlands that you're making. Germany has softened its position on Eurobonds. Why has that happened? Because the German right-wing sovereigntist party, the AfD, has been losing ground. I mean, it failed to mount an effective challenge to Merkel during the pandemic, and it's lost a lot of support. It's also been it's been facing a lot of factional infighting. So it's lost ground. And so you see the German political establishment, which had previously resisted Eurobonds because they felt themselves under pressure from the AfD. Now that the AfD is retreating, well, they say, well, maybe Eurobonds are not such a bad idea after all. By contrast, in the Netherlands, if we start to see Wilders rising, then it may be that the Dutch political establishment will say to itself, well, we can't agree to Eurobonds because we can't afford to let Wilders get even stronger than he is already getting. So opposition to things like Eurobonds does very much depend on the electoral choices that people make in particular countries. If you vote for a party like the AfD, if you vote for Wilders, you're less likely to vote for Eurobonds than if you don't. I mean, I appreciate there are many other things you can say about these people, but that is a fact, and it's a point which people perhaps need to bear in mind. Now, is there a possibility of the Netherlands going against Germany? Actually, I think there is. We tend to think of Germany and the Netherlands as very closely aligned with each other, and many people think of the Netherlands as almost a kind of part of a kind of greater Germany, if you like. They imagine a sort of Teutonic bloc, Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, all forming one single sort of coherent Germanic bloc within the EU. I think this has always been a misunderstanding. There is actually a significant cultural difference between the Netherlands and Germany. And the Netherlands has always been a bit wary of Germany. If anything, its historic ties have tended to be closer to Britain, to England. So I can, to answer your question, I can imagine the Netherlands under a certain type of political leadership going against Germany, and Dutch opinion solidifying behind it. So I don't think that is inconceivable at all. Now, France, it's another thing again. Of course, if Marine Le Pen wins the French presidency next year, then that will give a huge boost to right-wing sovereigntist parties across Europe, including in the Netherlands. I mean, it needs to be said clearly that Wilders comes across to me as being significantly further to the right than Le Pen is, at least at the moment. But nonetheless, I think he would be boosted by her victory in France, and you would start to see a sort of significant uptick in support for people like Wilders. And I think that would have, as I've discussed, an important effect in a country like the Netherlands. If Macron is re-elected in France, even by the way, if Macron wins in France, wins the French presidential election with one vote, I'm not just saying, but even if he just wins, I think he will interpret that as a mandate to press ahead with his integrationist policies of more Europe even more aggressively. And then it will depend very much on what happens in relation to the Netherlands in this coming election. The Dutch up to now have resisted some of Macron's most fervid integrationist projects. They have opposed, as I have said, the whole idea of Eurobonds. But if Rutte wins by a landslide and strengthens his position, conceivably that might soften. And if we get a new president, re-elected president Macron, that might soften further, especially with a chancellor like Armin Laschet, who seems, shall we say, more open to the idea of Eurobonds. If, on the contrary, we see Wilders doing very well in this election and trimming Rutte's tail, then we could start to see the Netherlands, as it has shown that it is, as it has previously shown that it is ready to do, taking a harder line against Eurobonds, even if it is up against Germany, the combination of Germany and France. To what extent the Netherlands could do that, could withstand the kind of pressure that the Germans and the French can bring to bear, is problematic. But remember, there are other countries in the EU, including within the Eurozone, who would probably support the Dutch if the Dutch took those sort of positions. I mean, the Finns, the Slovaks, countries like that might go along with the Dutch. Remember the Frugal Four? The Netherlands is the leader of the Frugal Four. It was the country, as I said, which was most resistant to the Eurobonds and which resisted them very strongly last year.
All right, we'll continue to follow this story the closer we get to election day in the Netherlands. Alexander, thank you very much. Guys, smash that like. Make sure you are still subscribed to this channel. YouTube is unsubscribing people en masse from this channel. So make sure you still have a subscription to this channel because you get the notifications. You're supposed to get the notifications, that is. Also click that bell to make sure you get the notifications if the YouTube feature works as they say it works, which I highly doubt. But also check us out on BitChute, on Rumble, and please go to Odyssey as well. You'll find Alexander's channel, my channel, and the Duran's channel on Odyssey, ODYSEE.com. That is a great video channel, really nice design, guys. Check it out. It's really, really nice channel, and I'm impressed with the features that they roll out every day. Also has a really nice commenting system as well. Of course, go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch, maybe a nice hoodie, like what I got here. Alexander's got a nice sweatshirt, magic mugs, which increase your geopolitical IQ by the thousands, if not the hundreds of thousands. And also check out our video sponsor, which is Greek Travel Gurus. 10% off a one-time planning fee, 20% off a selection of fantastic private tours. Use the code Duran Greece Trip that is located underneath this video. It is 100% risk-free. 100% risk-free. You can book that trip, and you don't have to worry about losing your money or having any unexpected things happening with regards to travel. Greek travel gurus will make sure that nothing goes wrong and your money is guaranteed. So check it out and get those great discounts. Come to Greece. Let's have an ouzo. Let's have a coffee, and we'll talk geopolitics.
Indeed, indeed, and enjoy the wonderful cuisine that you find there, the amazing sea, the glorious landscape, one of the most wonderful and beautiful and remarkable landscapes in Europe, very unique to Greece. And also, of course, you have the great classical antiquities, if that's what you're interested in. The great advantage, the great thing that Greek travel gurus offers is that they're prepared to organize your holiday around your preferences. So depending on what you like and what you want to do, they will arrange it for you. So please look them up. And as Alex said, and please also check us out at our shops, at our other channels, and on our other platforms. And remember to support us too through PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. And of course, we accept payments via Bitcoin and all those other currencies.
Bitcoin, Litecoin, Monero. We'll add EMC squared, which is a new one. I'll add that in as well. And we're getting into getting the crypto, which is really cool. All right, guys, take care.
Yeah.